Imagine discovering there's a single word, just one word, that if pronounced correctly, would fundamentally alter your spiritual life. Ever. Here's the problem. The masters themselves, the ones who should be guiding you, are keeping this word a secret. Eckhart Tolle? He's no exception. For years, I questioned why some spiritual seekers make such rapid progress toward enlightenment, while others remain stuck for decades, reading the same books, practicing the same meditations, following the same teachings. Then I uncovered something deeply unsettling. A hidden vocabulary exists. Words carrying specific frequencies. Words that, when spoken with the right intention, dissolve layers of mental conditioning we didn't even know were there. But why hide this from us? The answer will disturb you, because if everyone knew these words, if everyone had access to this linguistic key, the masters themselves would lose their authority. Think about that for a moment. You could accelerate your spiritual journey simply by knowing the right words? Would you still need years of workshops? Books that say the same thing in different ways? Expensive retreats promising what a single word could deliver? I know how you feel right now. You ever felt like you were being kept in the dark? As if there was something all the masters knew? But no one would tell you directly. You're not imagining things. The first forbidden word I'll reveal today is one Eckhart Tolle mentions only once in his entire body of work. Once. Hidden within a seemingly insignificant paragraph. But before I tell you what it is, you need to understand why it was buried. This word has the power to instantly dissolve what Tolle calls the veil of the mind. Not gradually, not after years of practice, instantly. And that word can't be sold in books. It can't be taught in workshops. It can only be whispered from heart to heart, like the ancient masters did before spirituality became a marketplace. I discovered the first forbidden word during a moment of utter despair. I'd been studying Eckhart Tolle religiously for 3 years. I read The Power of Now every week, practiced observing my thoughts, tried to stay present, but nothing happened. I felt like an actor, playing the role of a spiritual person, repeating the right words, making the right gestures. But inside I knew I was pretending. Until one night, frustrated, I yelled to the universe, "What am I not understanding?" And then, silence. A silence unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of, and in that silence, a word emerged. Not as a thought, not as a memory. Simply was. As if it had always been there, waiting for me to stop searching so it could be found. I pronounced that word for the first time. Something inside me broke. It wasn't a mystical experience. I didn't see lights. I didn't feel ecstasy. Simpler than that. It was like waking up from a dream. I didn't even know I was dreaming. And I realized something terrible. All the books I'd read, all the hours of meditation, all the lectures I'd attended were just preparation for this moment, for this word. No one told me that. If they had, I would have skipped everything else. I would have gone straight to the word. Maybe I wasn't ready. Or maybe the masters themselves didn't know I could be ready. Have you ever felt spiritually underestimated? Like the teachings you receive are a diluted version of what really works? I know you have. That's exactly what's happening. Second forbidden word is even more powerful than the first, and Eckhart Tolle knows it very well. But He never teaches it publicly. Know where I found it? In an interview he gave in 1998. Before he became famous, before he learned to edit his words. In that interview, he mentions a word in German. A word that, according to him, dissolves the illusion of time in a fraction of a second. But when asked to explain further, he changed the subject. That word never appeared again in any of his books. Coincidence? I spent 2 years searching for that interview. 2 years. Till I finally found it in a university library. On a dusty cassette tape no one remembered existed. And when I heard that word, when I pronounced it for the first time, I understood why it was erased from the official teachings. Because it works too fast, because it cuts through all the intermediaries, because it takes you directly where you want to go, without going through the 1,000 steps that the masters insist are necessary. But are they really necessary? Or do they exist to keep you dependent? To ensure you keep buying books, attending courses, always seeking the next level of teaching? I know it's hard to accept this possibility, especially if you, like me, placed Eckhart Tolle on a pedestal. But what if I told you that Tolle himself was a victim of this system before becoming famous? And what if I told you there's a third word? A word he learned from a Tibetan master, but promised never to reveal publicly. A word that, according to this master, is so powerful that it can awaken a person in minutes, but it can also drive them to madness if they are not prepared. Feel prepared? Because I need to warn you before I continue. Once you know these words, once you pronounce them with the correct intention, there's no going back. You won't be able to pretend you don't know anymore. You'll no longer be able to hide behind the story that the spiritual path is long and gradual, because you'll have proof that a shortcut exists. And that proof will change everything. Change how you view spiritual books. It will change how you view the masters. It will change how you view yourself. Are you ready for this change? The moment I reveal the first forbidden word, you become responsible for it. You become responsible for the power it carries, and you become responsible for deciding whether or not to use it. Choice will be entirely yours. But before you make that choice, before you cross that line, you need to understand exactly what's at stake. These words aren't just sounds. They are keys. Keys to doors that, once opened, can never be closed again. On the other side of those doors, on the other side, exists a version of you that the masters would prefer you never knew. A version that doesn't need them. A version that doesn't need years of a version that simply knows. The first forbidden word, it's a word you already know. You've heard it 1,000 times, never pronounced it correctly. Thus, but not how you think. Not as confirmation, not as agreement. Thus, as absolute acceptance of the present moment, as total surrender to what is. Talks about accepting the now. He's talking about this word, but he never teaches you how to pronounce it internally. He never explains that there's a difference between thinking thus and feeling thus, because the internal pronunciation of thus isn't mental, it's visceral. It's as if you're signing a cosmic contract, as if you're telling the universe, I stop fighting this. I stop resisting. Whatever it is, I accept. But there's a specific technique that Tibetan masters used, a technique that Tolle mentioned only once in a private conversation that was recorded without his knowledge. When you pronounce thus internally, you can't be trying to change anything. You can't be expecting something to improve after the acceptance. It has to be a genuine surrender, as if you're dying to the need for things to be different. When you manage to do that, when you really feel the word thus echoing in your chest, something extraordinary happens. Your unconscious resistance simply melts away, like ice melting in the sun. It's as if you're saying yes with every cell of your body, with every fiber of your being. Try it now. Your eyes. Breathe deeply. When you exhale, mentally pronounce thus, as if it were the last word you'll ever utter in your life. Did you feel it? Did you feel something dissolve within you? It's not the mind that relaxes, something deeper. It's as if a tension you didn't even know you were carrying simply disappears. But I warned you that you would reject it. Is that all you're thinking? A word I already knew? It's precisely that rejection that keeps you trapped. The masters know that our mind always seeks complexity. It always wants something elaborate, something that seems important. But spiritual truth is embarrassingly simple. The second forbidden word will shock you even more. It's here, but again, not as you imagine, not as a physical location. Here, as the only place where consciousness exists, as the 0 point of all experience. When you pronounce here internally, you're doing more than locating your body in space. You're anchoring your consciousness in the only moment that truly exists. Tolle has been talking about presence for decades. Never teaches you that presence has a keyword, a word that, when pronounced correctly, instantly pulls you out of the mind and places you exactly where you need to be. But there's a secret within that secret. When Sufi masters pronounced here, they weren't just locating themselves in space. They were recognizing that here is where God exists, where the divine manifests, where the infinite touches the finite. That's why this word is so powerful, because when you truly feel here, you're not just present in the moment. You're present in eternity. You're touching that place where time and space meet with what lies beyond them. There's a specific way to pronounce it that multiplies its power. You pronounce here as if you were discovering a treasure, as if for the first time in your life, you were really seeing where you are. As if this here were the most sacred place in the universe. Because it is. A word that when pronounced correctly, instantly pulls you out of the mind and places you exactly where you need to be. Here. Say it now. But say it as if you were discovering where you are for the first time in your life. Here. As if it were a revelation. As if it were a miracle to be exactly where you are. You starting to understand why these words are kept secret? Because they work immediately, without preparation, without years of practice, without intermediaries. But there's a bigger problem. Once you master these two words, once you learn to pronounce them with the correct intention, you realize something disturbing about the entire spiritual industry. Realize that 90% of the teachings are unnecessary, that most spiritual books are just describing states that you can access instantaneously with these words, that most masters are just elaborating on what can be experienced now, with two words, thus, here. I know this makes you uncomfortable, because if it's so simple, why didn't anyone teach you before? Why did you spend years searching for something that was always available? The answer will deeply disturb you, because simplicity doesn't generate money. Because if everyone knew that enlightenment could be accessed with two words, who would buy the next spiritual book? Who would attend the next workshop? Who would sign up for the next retreat? But there is a third word, the most powerful of all. A word that Eckhart Tolle learned from that Tibetan master and promised never to reveal. I broke that promise for you because I believe you have the right to know. The third word is emptiness. But not emptiness as absence. Emptiness as infinite potential. Emptiness as the space that contains all possibilities. This word is dangerous because when you pronounce it correctly, when you truly feel what it means, you temporarily dissolve the ego completely. 2 seconds, you don't exist as a person. You exist as pure consciousness. That's why the masters hesitate to teach it, because not everyone is prepared for dissolution. Let me tell you exactly what happens when you master this word. When you pronounce emptiness correctly, you're not thinking about absence. You're feeling the space between your thoughts, the space between your breaths, the space where you exist before becoming someone. Zen masters knew this for centuries. They used this word as a gateway to Satori, to sudden awakening, but kept it secret because they knew the Western mind would interpret emptiness as negative, as depression, as a lack of life, when in reality, it's the opposite. Emptiness is the fullness before form. It's the potential before manifestation. It's you before becoming the roles you play. And when you can feel this, when you can, for a few seconds, experience being this conscious emptiness, something changes permanently within you. You can never again completely believe your own stories because you've had a taste of who you are before the stories. And that taste, that brief recognition, is more transformative than years of therapy or meditation. But if you've come this far, if you've listened to everything I've said so far, you're ready. Emptiness. Pronounce it internally and feel as if you were the space where everything happens. Emptiness. As if you were the silence between thoughts. Emptiness. As if you were the screen where all experience is projected. Now do you understand why these words are forbidden? Because they give you direct access to what masters take years to explain. Because they cut through all the intermediaries. Because they prove you've always had the power. But there's an even more disturbing truth behind this. Most spiritual masters themselves don't know these words. Yes, you heard that right. They spent so much time creating complex systems, philosophies, and methodologies that they forgot the simple tools that really work. It's as if they built elaborate castles around 3 small keys. And now they're so proud of the castles that they've forgotten what the keys are for. Eckhart Tolle is an exception. He knows, but he learned through extreme suffering. Maybe that's why he understands that not everyone is ready to jump straight to the keys. Maybe he truly believes you need to build your own castle first, need to go through years of preparation, need to deserve direct access. But what if he's wrong? Eckhart Tolle is an exception. He knows. Maybe he truly believes you need to build your own castle, need to go through years of preparation, need to What if you don't need preparation? What if you're already ready, but no one had the courage to test it? Because here's what the spiritual industry doesn't want you to know. They never tested what happens when you teach the powerful tools right away. They assumed it would be dangerous, assumed people couldn't handle it, assumed preparation is necessary. But no one ever did the experiment. No one ever took a group of normal people and taught them these 3 words directly. Without years of prior preparation, I did that experiment informally, with friends, with family, with people who had never read a spiritual book in their lives. And guess what I discovered? It worked the same. Sometimes it worked better because they didn't have complex spiritual concepts creating resistance. They didn't have expectations about what enlightenment should be. They simply experienced the words. And the word always been capable. Just didn't know the right words. But now us, here, 3 words that can change your spiritual life forever. 3 words that the masters prefer to keep secret. 3 words that are now yours. Use them responsibly, because you experience their power. Once you feel how they work, you'll never be the same. You'll never again be dependent on books. Never again be dependent on masters. Never again be dependent on external teachings, as you will have discovered the secret that they all know, but few have the courage to teach directly. Enlightenment is not a destination, it's a recognition. And that recognition can happen now with 3 words. Thus, here, emptiness. But let me tell you something that no master will tell you. These words are only the beginning. They open the door, but you still need to go through it. And on the other side of that door, on the other side, exists a world where you no longer need to seek, where you no longer need to search, where you simply are. The question now is, do you have the courage to cross infinitely? Do you have the courage to abandon the security of spiritual seeking and enter the uncertainty of realization? Because once you cross that door, once you stop seeking and start being, there's no instruction manual. There's no next book to read. There's no next level to achieve. There's only you and life, and the constant recognition that you've always been what you were looking for. That's why the masters keep these words secret. Not to control you, but to protect you. Because once you discover you've always had the power, once you realize you've never needed anything external, you become spiritually orphaned. You stop being a seeker, and you become simply you. Without stories, without spiritual identity, without anything to chase. It's a terrifying freedom. It's a freedom not everyone wants, because it's easier to be an eternal seeker than to accept that you've already arrived. It's more comfortable to believe something is still missing than to recognize that you've always been complete. But now you have the 3 words, and the choice is yours. You can use them to quickly experience what books try to explain, or you can keep them as just another piece of spiritual knowledge in your collection. Difference between experiencing and just knowing. Difference between freedom and imprisonment. Realization and eternal seeking. Between being and pretending to be. Thus, here, emptiness. 3 words, 3 keys, 3 ways to recognize what you've always been. But remember what I said at the beginning. Once you pronounce these words correctly, once you experience their power, there's no turning back. You can no longer pretend you don't know. You will become responsible for your own. That responsibility is the price of true spirituality. The price of stopping searching and starting being. Willing to pay that price? Because you are, if you really are. Then close your eyes now. Take a deep breath and pronounce the 3 words as if it were the very first time. Thus, completely accept this moment. Here, anchor yourself in the only place that exists, empty. Dissolve into the infinite space of consciousness. Realize you aren't learning anything new. Simply remembering. Remembering what you've always known. Remembering what you've always been. Remembering home. Maybe, just maybe, the words weren't really forbidden. Maybe they were just waiting for you to stop searching outside so they could be found within. Always been, where they will always be, waiting for you. See, every time you pronounce thus, you're saying yes to life. Every time you feel here, you're coming home. Every time you experience empty, you're touching your true nature. And maybe the masters didn't hide these words to control you. Maybe they hid them to protect you. not from the experience, but from the responsibility that comes after it. Because once you know you can access peace, presence, and clarity at any moment, once you know you have these three keys in your pocket, you can no longer use the excuse that you're lost. You can no longer blame circumstances. You can no longer expect the world to change for you to be happy, because you've discovered that happiness, peace, presence, all of it is independent of the external world. And this discovery, this simple discovery, is simultaneously the greatest liberation and the greatest responsibility you can receive. That's why the words were hidden. Not because you didn't deserve it, but because maybe you weren't yet ready to be completely free. But now you have the keys. Use them wisely. Use them with love. And remember, they only work when spoken from the heart, not the mind, the heart.